Ignored on her birthday by her own children, a mother makes the ultimate revenge move, selling the family home where her daughter dreamed of having her wedding. But what happens next? That twist will leave you speechless. Welcome to her Fireside Stories, where life's most powerful lessons unfold by the warmth of shared experience. Today's tale of family betrayal transforms into something you'll never see coming, a story about the true power of forgiveness when you least expect it. Stay with me until the final moment your heart will thank you. If this resonates with you, hit subscribe, share your thoughts below, and let me know where you're listening from today. Your stories matter here. This is her Fireside Stories, where every ending is just the beginning. I never imagined that the most heartbreaking betrayal of my life would happen over a piece of chocolate cake. Yet there I was, seated in an empty dining room on my 70th birthday, staring at a full spread of untouched food, my eyes fixed on the clock as the candles on my birthday cake burned low. My daughter, whom I once cradled in my arms with the utmost tenderness, did not even bother to show up or call. And this wasn't just any gathering. It was the first time in years I had attempted to bring our fractured family together. The ghosts of my past, the echo of laughter that used to fill these walls, and the memory of a time when birthdays still mattered, swirled around me like a cruel, mocking wind. I had set out the best plates that evening, carefully folded the napkins just as she used to love, and even found an old playlist of music that my son had once adored. Yet the silence was deafening, heavier than any ocean wave outside our beachside home. My name is Loretta Reese, and if you saw me now, you'd hardly believe the life I've lived. My once long hair, which used to be braided neatly down my back whenever I walked along the shore, is now a short sandy bob with windswept layers, a style I chose to match the salt-kissed coastline and the simpler days I'd hoped for in retirement. My face bears the traces of countless sleepless nights, tears shed, and unspoken regrets. This home, perched on the edge of the sea, was supposed to be my sanctuary, a place of laughter and dreams, where I could watch my children grow and thrive. Instead, it became my prison, each room a silent testament to the sacrifices I made for a family that scarcely acknowledged me. Still, I'd hung on for years, clinging to the possibility that my children, my daughter Cora, with her sun-bleached beach curls, and my son Silas, who wears his dark hair in a short practical cut, would someday look past their own busy lives and see me. But as I blew out my own birthday candles in solitude, I felt a shift deep in my bones. The betrayal, their betrayal, cut so deep that I finally realized it was time for me to act. And the first step of that action, it would be shocking enough to make them remember that I'm not a ghost in their story, but a woman who once had hopes, dreams, and a stake in this family just as real as theirs. To understand the weight of that lonely birthday, you have to travel back in time to when the house by the sea was just a wisp of a dream. My late husband, Donovan Reese, a man with a stylish salt and pepper undercut that he maintained proudly, even into his 60s, always spoke of this place as our family's anchor. He saw it as a grand inheritance. We could pass down an emblem of a legacy we never truly had the unity to support. In the beginning, I too was enchanted by the idea of a forever home, where the waves might lull us to sleep and our children could roam barefoot on the shore. I used to picture family barbecues, holiday gatherings, and even the possibility of grandchildren building sandcastles under the sun. Little did I know that along with the panoramic ocean views and the gentle breezes, this house would also come to hold the darkest chapters of my life. Donovan wasn't always the villain of my story, and that's perhaps the cruelest irony. When we met, he was charming and ambitious, his wit as sharp as his jawline. He sold me on a future that shimmered with possibilities. But as the years passed, his warm smile turned cold, overshadowed by a need for control that left me feeling small and incapable of voicing my own dreams. He handled all our finances, never letting me in on the details, telling me things like, "Don't worry, Lori, I've got it all under control." Or, "You just focus on the kids. I should have fought for transparency. I should have insisted on knowing more. But I was in love and I was taught that a good wife trusts her husband. Cora was our firstborn. She arrived screaming louder than any newborn I'd ever heard, her thick mane of hair already tinted a soft gold that would soon turn into the beachy curls she still flaunts. Silas followed 2 years later, a quiet baby, a quiet child, and eventually a quiet man, his short, neat hairstyle reflecting his preference for order. For a while, life was almost everything we'd hoped for. The two kids making sandcastles out back, Donovan and I watching them from a rickety porch swing, imagining a perfect world we believed we had time to create. But perfection is fragile, and illusions even more so. I learned this the hard way. When Donovan died 3 years ago, everything changed, but not in the way people might think. Yes, there was sorrow, and I cried genuine tears. Yet there was a liberating sense that maybe I could finally breathe. I didn't have to answer to his scrutiny anymore. The weight that had chained me to his ideas of how the world should run was suddenly gone. But in place of that weight came a terrifying new burden debt. It was staggering to learn that Donovan, with all his confident talk and promises, had left behind an avalanche of unpaid bills, mortgages, and loans. The house I once believed was fully ours was actually teetering on the brink of repossession. I remember the day the debt collectors came knocking. It was rainy and the sound of thunder blended with the roar of the ocean until I couldn't tell which was which. They handed me documents I could barely process. My hands shook so fiercely that I had to set the papers down to keep from ripping them. The real estate agent who eventually came by painted a bleak picture. "You might have to sell, Mrs. Reese. I'm sorry." The words stung like salt in an open wound. Part of me refused to let go. This was my family's home, the place where I'd nursed skinned knees and read bedtime stories under flickering porch lights. At the time, Cora was too busy with her fiancé to pay much attention. She'd grown into an image-conscious woman who posted photos of her beachy waves on social media, always chasing the next perfect shot. Silas, ever the mediator, ever the quiet follower, was living 2 towns over with his own family. He offered polite sympathy, but no real solutions, no emotional support that could have steered me away from my growing desperation. To them, it was Mom's situation, something on the periphery of their vibrant, bustling lives. I tried to keep the facade of security for as long as I could. I used what little savings I had to make, partial payments. I cut corners, lived frugally, turned down the thermostat in winter. But the pile of bills kept growing, overshadowing the sunlight that used to flood through these windows. Worse, the loneliness dug deeper into my bones as each day reminded me that I was fighting a war my own children seemed to have no interest in waging. Cora's engagement brought a fleeting sense of hope. Or maybe it was just distraction. She announced that she wanted her wedding at the beach house, seeing it as the perfect backdrop for a dreamy ceremony. "Think about it, Mom," she said with an excited sparkle in her eye. "A simple canopy on the sand, sea breeze in our hair, and the pictures. Oh, they'll look amazing." She had her hair pinned up that day, a few tendrils artfully escaping to frame her face. I remember thinking how grown up she looked, how far she'd come from the little girl stomping around in seashells. Yet something felt off. Cora pointed out every flaw: chipped paint here, a water stain on the ceiling there, furniture that didn't match her vision. The house once cherished became an eyesore. She wanted to renovate beyond recognition. I tried to mask my hurt, telling myself I should be happy. She wanted the family home for her big day. But each complaint felt like a jab, a painful reminder that the intangible soul of this place no longer mattered to her. It was all about aesthetics, about how it would look on social media. She was even considering wearing a custom veil made of seashell accessories, wanting to embody the perfect coastal bride. Her hairstyle, she insisted, would be an elaborate updo with white starfish pins curated by a celebrity stylist. Every detail was planned to the letter, except for any genuine acknowledgement of my feelings or the house's hidden history. Meanwhile, Silas occasionally dropped by with his spouse and children in tow. His hair was always neatly trimmed, and he dressed in a casual but deliberate style, as if he were the living antithesis of Cora's flamboyant flair. He listened politely to her wedding updates but rarely voiced an opinion, slipping easily into the background. I wanted him to say something to defend the memories we had in this house, to remind Cora that not everything needed to be Instagram worthy. But Silas just shrugged, offering non-committal phrases like, "Whatever works, sis," or, "As long as everyone's happy, I'm fine." I felt the distance growing between me and my children every time they entered the house. They treated it like a blank stage for their own stories, forgetting it was the living record of mine. Still, I held my tongue. I convinced myself that if I sacrificed a little more, if I gave them space to flourish, maybe they'd appreciate me in the end. Shabu. Days turned into weeks, and every moment in that house felt like a countdown clock ticking away. The renovations demanded by Cora didn't just press on my emotional state, they became a financial chokehold. She wanted an updated kitchen for the caterers, a polished wooden deck for the reception, even a refurbished guest cottage for the bridesmaids. When I hinted that money was tight, she'd brush off my concerns with an airy, "Don't worry, Mom. We'll figure it out," the same phrase Donovan used to lull me into complacency. I tried to keep up with the facade, but inside I was screaming. It was around this time that I decided to do something small, a step toward reclaiming my life. Invite both Cora and Silas for a simple birthday dinner. I envisioned an intimate evening, just the three of us reminiscing about when they were children chasing sandpipers on the shore. I decorated the table with seashells we'd collected over the years. Choosing a centerpiece of driftwood shaped by the tide, I cooked their favorite dishes: grilled shrimp skewers, roasted vegetables, and a key lime pie. I knew Silas adored. I even booked an appointment at the salon to tidy up my hair, giving my short bob a light caramel highlight, hoping I might feel just a bit more confident, a bit more seen. The day of my birthday. I woke early, the morning sun spilling across the kitchen floor. I was almost joyful. Could this be the start of a turning point? A chance for us to reconnect without wedding planning, overshadowing everything. As the clock approached 6 in the evening, I lit the candles and waited and waited. The evening stretched on the food growing cold, the silence thickening like fog. Every time I heard a car outside, my heart leaped only to be shattered when it passed by. By 9 o'clock, it was clear they weren't coming. I made a few desperate calls, leaving voicemails that grew more frantic with each repetition. By midnight, I had blown out my own candles. The key lime pie, once an emblem of sweet memories, sat untouched, mocking me with its silent presence. It wasn't just disappointment I felt. It was utter loneliness and emptiness that settled in my bones and refused to leave. When morning came, I discovered a text from Silas time-stamped close to midnight. "Mom, sorry. Things got hectic with the kids. Let's reschedule." No mention of my birthday. No note of regret about the meal I'd prepared. Just a half-hearted apology that only fueled the anger pulsing beneath my heartbreak. Hours later, another from Cora. "Oh my gosh, I'm so sorry, Mom. I totally forgot. Been swamped with wedding stuff. Rain check." The breeziness of her response stung so much I nearly dropped my phone. No remorse, no deeper acknowledgement of what she'd missed. Just an assumption that I would be there, infinitely patient, waiting for her to remember I existed. I didn't cry that morning. Strangely, I felt calm. Perhaps it was the kind of calm that settles in when you've passed the point of rage. It was a clarity, a resolute acceptance that something fundamental had to change. I looked at the piles of debt on the dining table, the half-empty renovation plans scrawled on notepads, and I realized I couldn't keep living for the hope that my children would remember me. They were grown adults, fully capable of making their own choices. If they wanted me, they knew where to find me, and if not, I had to protect what was left of my heart. That was the day I finally decided to sell the house. Strange that a single missed birthday dinner could be the tipping point, but it was the final crack in a glass already riddled with fractures. I contacted a real estate agent who had been recommended by a neighbor months ago. I'm ready, I told her. I need this done as soon as possible. She picked up on the urgency in my voice, asking if I was sure, but I knew with more certainty than I'd ever felt that I needed to let go. The illusions, the debt, the haunting memories, all of it. Before I continue, I want to pause briefly. If you've been drawn into my story, please consider subscribing to our channel. Your support means you won't miss any future updates or heartfelt tales like this one, and it helps keep this space alive for stories that need to be told. Preparing the house for the market was like peeling back layer after layer of my life. Every closet I opened released a memory, children's artwork, old photo albums, Donovan's suits that still carried a faint trace of his cologne. I found a stack of letters I had written during the early days of our marriage. Letters never sent, never shared, full of frustrations and hopes. Reading them felt like opening a time capsule. I saw how naive I was, how desperate I'd been for a partner who never truly arrived. The hardest room to clear was the master bedroom. Donovan's presence lingered there, intangible but suffocating. I came across his old hairbrush on the dresser, the place where he meticulously maintained that stylish undercut. I remembered countless nights lying awake listening to him snore, wondering if he really cared about me or if he only cared about preserving an image of control. Sifting through his things, I felt a conflict of emotions: sorrow for what we once had, rage for what he became, and a surprising wave of relief that he was gone. It's a terrible thing to feel relief at someone's death, especially when it's your spouse. But in that moment, I allowed myself the truth. Donovan had been a cage, his passing a release. Then there were all the wedding decorations Cora had accumulated in the guest room: starfish centerpieces, seashell hairpins, color swatches for bridesmaids' dresses. She'd left them there as if my space was just a storage unit. The more I boxed them up, the angrier I got. How had she become so thoughtless, so wrapped up in her own world? I imagined her with that carefully sculpted beach wave hairstyle, phone in hand, snapping selfies while I struggled with bubble wrap and packing tape. It was almost comical. Amid all this packing, realtors came and went discussing market trends and square footage. They pointed out the property's potential, its prime location, and the breathtaking views. But to me, the house no longer felt like home. It felt like a museum of my life's failures, a testament to how quickly love, family, and dreams can crumble when communication and compassion fade. As word got around that I was selling, the responses from neighbors and acquaintances ranged from surprise to pity. "But your daughter's wedding," they'd ask, eyes wide with concern. "Wasn't she planning to hold it here?" I forced a polite smile and nodded. "Plans change." I'd say, refusing to explain further. Why should I defend myself to people who barely knew how I spent my nights awake, pacing, worrying about bills and broken relationships? The real earthquake came when Cora and Silas finally heard the news. Silas was first to call Mom. "Is it true you're selling the beach house?" His tone was a mix of disbelief and accusation. When I confirmed, he fell silent for a moment before blurting, "But Cora was counting on it for her wedding. You know that, right?" I bristled at how he immediately made it about his sister. "Yes, Silas, I'm aware," I replied curtly. "But I'm done waiting for everyone else's approval. I have bills to pay and a life to salvage." "The house goes," he muttered something about me being impulsive, then hung up. Cora's reaction was more dramatic. She called, her voice trembling with anger. "You can't do this, Mom. My wedding is in a few months. We've already told people it's going to be at the family beach house. Think of the embarrassment, all the invitations. I was speechless for a long moment, partly astonished by her nerve. She didn't once ask why I was selling if I was okay, or how she'd failed to support me. It was all about her embarrassment invitations. I found myself responding with a calmness I didn't know I possessed. The house is mine, Cora, and I'm selling it because I need to. You left me alone on my birthday. You never ask how I'm doing. Why should I keep sacrificing for someone who can't show up for a single dinner? Her silence spoke volumes when she finally spat out a retort calling me selfish. I almost laughed at the irony. Maybe I was selfish for the first time in decades, and I refused to feel ashamed. I hung up the phone, heart pounding, but strangely free. Once the house officially hit the market, a whirlwind of activity descended. Open houses, private showings, curious couples walking through each room with wide eyes. Some marveled at the ocean view from the kitchen window. Others admired the well-aged hardwood floors. A few saw potential to flip it into a modern beach retreat. With every stranger who entered, I felt a pang of sadness, but also a strange sense of possibility. Maybe someone else could turn this place into the happy home it never truly was for me. During this period, I found myself oddly reflective. I would sit on the porch swing at twilight, the ocean breeze ruffling my short hair, and reminisce about the times when Donovan would push the kids on a makeshift tire swing in the backyard, or the times when we'd roast marshmallows on the beach. Those moments felt genuine then, or at least I'd let myself believe they were. Reality, of course, was far more complicated. Donovan's controlling nature often lurked beneath those fleeting smiles, and Cora and Silas's laughter rang loud, but so did their arguments and demands. One evening, while finishing a phone call with the realtor, I noticed a figure approaching from the road. As the twilight glow revealed the person's features, I realized it was Silas. He stood at the edge of the property, seemingly uncertain whether to step forward. "Mom," he called softly. His usual calm demeanor overshadowed by tension, I invited him to sit on the porch. He sighed heavily, looking out at the ocean. "I'm not here to fight," he said, running a hand through his neatly cropped hair. I feel like everything is slipping away. Dad's gone. Cora's a mess with her wedding, and now this house, our childhood home, is being sold. I know we messed up. We should have shown up. We should have cared more. But is there really no other way? His words carried regret, but they also contained a kind of plea. Yet I couldn't ignore how late his remorse was. "Silas, this isn't just about the wedding or my birthday dinner. It's about years of feeling invisible. I'm not changing my mind." He bowed his head, tears brimming in his eyes, and I found my own anger melting, replaced by a quiet sadness for a family that had long ago lost its center. Silas stayed the night in his old bedroom, dust motes swirling in the moonlight as we both tried to recapture a sense of normalcy. In the morning, over a cup of coffee, we talked more openly than we had in years. He confessed his constant urge to keep peace in the family, how he felt stuck between Donovan's overbearing nature and Cora's fiery ambition. "I never learned to speak up, Mom," he admitted, gripping his mug as if it were a lifeline. "I just wanted everyone to get along, so I went along with everything." His confession was a bittersweet revelation. While I was grateful for the honesty, it also highlighted how deep the family's dysfunction had run. My children had grown up in a house overshadowed by Donovan's presence, each in their own way, struggling to be seen. Cora sought attention outwardly while Silas retreated into himself. I'd been so busy trying to appease Donovan, keep the house afloat, and live up to the perfect wife and mother ideal that I'd overlooked the subtle signs that my kids were also hurting. But that morning, I didn't have the energy to comfort him. All I could do was offer a gentle squeeze of his hand. "We can't change the past, Silas," I said, "but we can decide what we do now." He nodded, his gaze drifting toward the boxes stacked in the hallway. Boxes filled with memories, regrets, and the remnants of a life once shared. I expected him to try once more to convince me to keep the house, but he simply said, "I understand, Mom. I really do." He left later that day, promising to visit again soon. A strange calm followed, as though that conversation had finally acknowledged the unspoken truths festering for so long. The sale of the house proceeded swiftly. Cora kept her distance. I'd get brief texts about wedding headaches or half-hearted updates on her fiancé, but she never once asked about my health, my finances, or whether I needed help packing. In her eyes, I was a roadblock, standing between her and her dream venue. And in mine, she was a grown woman who had long since turned her back on me, choosing her ambition over our bond. A week later, I finalized the paperwork with the realtor. I remember every detail of that day, how the pen felt in my trembling hand, the faint aroma of coffee from the agent's desk, and the light drizzle spattering against the window. I had braced myself for a tumult of emotions, regret, second thoughts, an urge to tear up the contract and flee, but when I signed on the dotted line, a surprising sense of freedom washed over me, as if invisible shackles had snapped, letting me stand straighter than I had in years. That night, I found myself sitting in the living room, still half-furnished walls mostly bare, revisiting old family photos. One picture showed Donovan kissing my cheek on our 10th anniversary, his hair meticulously styled, my own long locks blowing in the wind. Another photo featured Cora and Silas, around 8 and 6, building an elaborate sandcastle fortress. In all these images, we looked so happy, so assured of our future. Yet behind every smile, I could now see the subtle cracks. Donovan's controlling hand on my shoulder, my own tired eyes, the forced angles in Cora's poses. I wondered how many of those moments were genuine and how many were staged for the camera. Still in the quiet hush of that nearly empty house, I allowed myself a final moment of nostalgia before letting it all go. The next day, a couple from out of town came for one last walkthrough. They appeared gentle, a bit older, close to my own age. The wife, wearing a short, curly haircut that matched the beachy climate, told me she had lost her husband once before, marrying this man who had also lost his spouse. It felt like they too were forging a second chance at life. They admired the view from the back porch, commented on the sturdy foundation and the potential for a cozy reading nook. I saw a reflection of myself in their hopeful eyes. As they left, the wife turned to me and said, "We'll take good care of it if you'll let us." I smiled through tears, replying, "I know you will." On the morning the sale became official, I gathered my last belongings, loaded them into a moving truck, and handed over the keys. The sound of the ocean followed me to the driveway, as if whispering a farewell. I stood there, my newly styled bob catching the salty breeze, and let the moment stretch. Then I slipped into the driver's seat and left the house, my house for the final time. At first, I stayed with a friend in a nearby apartment complex, a friend who had a small spare room and a compassionate ear. In those initial nights, I expected to feel an acute sense of loss or pangs of regret. But mostly, I felt a slow, cautious relief. A clean slate stretched before me, unburdened by Donovan's debts, uncolored by the ghosts of birthdays forgotten. I took quiet walks by a different stretch of shoreline, noticing how even the waves sounded different there, less menacing, more reassuring. Cora, however, was not reassured. Word spread quickly that her precious wedding venue was sold. She called, unleashing a fury I never knew she was capable of. "You've ruined my life, Mom," she practically screamed. "How am I supposed to fix this now? Do you have any idea how I've bragged about the family beach house to everyone?" I let her words wash over me like water off a rock. I no longer owed her an explanation for my choices. Despite her outburst, I heard an undercurrent of panic. Perhaps she was beginning to realize that her fiancé, the man she claimed was perfect, might not be as flawless as she'd led herself to believe. Silas, on the other hand, sent a text. I understand, Mom. Do what's best for you. That simple message buoyed me, if only slightly. At least one of my children seemed to recognize the gravity of what I'd endured. By the way, if you've been finding value in my story and want to stay connected, please subscribe to our channel. It's a small action on your part, but it helps build a supportive community for stories like mine. Stories of second chances, transformations, and personal courage. A few weeks passed in relative calm. I'd wake early in my friend's spare room, brew coffee, and take slow walks along a narrower beach nearby. Sometimes I'd watch families setting up umbrellas and children squealing with delight as they dashed into the waves. Watching them, I felt both a pang of longing and a curious sense of distance. I had once been that mother, vigilantly watching my kids at play, believing wholeheartedly that those moments were stepping stones to a better future for all of us. I began dabbling in painting, not that I was any good at it, but swirling colors on a canvas felt liberating, even if my seascapes looked more like smudges than masterpieces. My friend gently encouraged me, saying creativity might fill the spaces inside me that had gone dark. She wasn't wrong. Each time I picked up a paintbrush, my chest felt a little lighter, the knots in my stomach unwinding. Then late one evening, my phone lit up with a call from Cora. Normally, I would brace myself for another attack, but something in her tone was different. She was crying. "Mom," she whispered, barely audible. "I'm sorry, I really messed up." Through choked sobs, she confessed that her fiancé had been unfaithful and emotionally abusive. He'd isolated her from friends, controlled her finances, and belittled her whenever she didn't meet his standards. I was too proud to see it, she wept, too fixated on having this perfect beach wedding, like an Instagram fantasy, that I ignored all the signs. Now I have no venue, no marriage, and no clue what I'm doing with my life. A swirl of emotions surged within me: empathy, anger, a protective instinct that never truly dies in a mother's heart. I remembered Donovan's cruelty, the decades I'd spent in silent frustration. Perhaps Cora had inadvertently chosen someone just like her father. A sobering realization. Despite everything, I couldn't bring myself to abandon her in her time of crisis. "Come over," I said gently. "I'm staying with a friend, but I'll be here for you." She cried harder, promising she'd drive over the next day. As I ended the call, I felt a flicker of something I thought had been extinguished: hope. Cora arrived the next morning looking nothing like the carefree woman I remembered. Her once meticulously styled beach curls were pulled into a loose, messy ponytail, and tears had reddened her eyes. She walked in with a trembling gait, as if every step made her soul ache. I led her to the small living area and offered tea. For a while, she just sobbed, head in her hands. Gone was the overconfident bride demanding a picture-perfect ceremony. In her place sat someone raw, scared, and deeply remorseful. Between sniffles, she managed to piece together her story: how her fiancé's behavior escalated once he realized the house was sold, and that it no longer served his lavish wedding fantasies. He blamed Cora, berated her, and soon she discovered his affair: text messages from another woman, blatant lies about where he spent his nights. Her voice wavered as she admitted, "I wanted to call you so many times, Mom, but I was ashamed. I didn't want you to know how bad it was." Watching her unravel, I was reminded of my younger self, once so enamored with Donovan that I ignored red flags and swallowed my own voice. A wave of compassion washed over me, though it mingled with sadness. It was disheartening to see my daughter repeat a version of my own mistakes, but in that moment I knew she needed my support more than my judgment. I gently rubbed her back. "Cora," I said, my voice calming even to my own ears, "I'm sorry you had to go through this, but I'm glad you finally saw the truth before it was too late." She lifted her tear-streaked face, eyes filled with remorse. "I'm sorry about everything," she whispered. I've been so focused on my own life, I forgot who you are, everything you did for us. For a moment, the weight of all her past dismissals and harsh words hung in the air, but her apology felt genuine. In the aftermath of heartbreak, sometimes the hardest step is recognizing how we contributed to our own suffering and to the pain of others. Cora was there at that difficult juncture, and though she was wading through her own regrets, I saw a glimmer in her eyes that whispered, I want to change. Cora stayed with me for a few nights at my friend's apartment. In that cramped spare room she and I shared, the kind of late night talks we hadn't had since she was a teenager, sneaking out past curfew. Through tears and laughter, regrets and confessions, we rediscovered pockets of connection that had been buried under years of misunderstanding. Cora admitted she'd always looked up to Donovan because he was a strong figure, never grasping how his strength came at the cost of other people's freedom. She saw me as meek, a woman who lived in the shadow of a larger-than-life husband. I guess I never understood what you went through. She confessed one evening, sipping tea from a chipped mug. I just assumed you were happy. Her words weren't an accusation. They were a sad realization of how little she really knew about my struggles, my quiet tears after Donovan's hurtful comments, and the nights I spent consoling myself with the idea that tomorrow might be better. It's partly my fault, I said gently. I never wanted to burden you or Silas with my problems. I thought I was protecting you, giving you a normal childhood. Maybe if I'd spoken up more, things would have turned out differently. We both sat in silence, each wrestling with the complexities of how family ties can simultaneously harm and heal. Cora fiddled with her hair, now loosened into gentle waves, a far cry from her usual polished style. I'm leaving him, she blurted at last. I need to pack my things, find a real job, and figure out who I am without him. I felt a surge of pride, even though her marriage was ending before it really began, even though it had been built on shallow promises, at least she was finding the courage to walk away. For the first time, I saw vulnerability and strength coexisting within Cora. She wasn't the demanding daughter or the self-centered bride. She was a woman stepping into her own truth. However painful that truth might be, I offered what encouragement I could, knowing she had to do most of the heavy lifting herself. Sometimes the greatest gift we can give our children is the space to learn on their own terms. As Cora gradually pieced her life back together, Silas made more frequent calls. He seemed genuinely worried about his sister, but also keenly interested in rebuilding the bridges he'd let rot. We talked about mundane things, what the kids were up to, how his short haircut was a nod to simplicity now that fatherhood left him little time for self-care. But we also tackled heavier topics, how he'd grown up watching Donovan chip away at my self-esteem, how that shaped his own conflict-avoidant personality. In one conversation, he admitted, I knew Dad wasn't good to you. I guess I just hoped if I stayed out of the way, things would calm down. And when you two were fighting, I tried to comfort Cora, thinking that was my role. His voice cracked, revealing a burden he'd carried for years. I reminded him that children shouldn't have to protect their parents. It should be the other way around. The guilt I sensed in him was overwhelming, but I offered the same olive branch I had extended to Cora. Understanding, not blame. Between these conversations, I quietly made plans to move forward. I knew I couldn't live in my friend's spare room forever. With the money from the sale of the beach house, I was no longer in debt, an unfamiliar yet liberating feeling. I found a modest apartment in a different coastal town, smaller but cozy with a gentle stretch of shoreline, just a short walk away. The day I signed the lease, I felt like a new chapter was truly beginning. Cora helped me decorate, picking out soft, nautical hues that reminded us both of simpler times. She even painted a small seashell mural in the living room, a skill she discovered during her attempts to find a creative outlet. Silas stopped by on the weekends to assemble furniture, occasionally bringing his kids who marveled at seeing their grandmother in a space that wasn't the old house. I felt like I was learning who my children really were, not just who I assumed or hoped them to be. Still, part of me feared that this fragile piece could shatter at any moment. Rebuilding trust felt like walking on shifting sand. A single misstep could send us all tumbling back into old patterns. But for once, I allowed myself the freedom to hope, just as life was settling into a gentler rhythm. An unexpected phone call from Silas stirred the waters again. He spoke with an uncharacteristic urgency. "Mom, you need to know something about Cora's ex." My stomach lurched. I had hoped that chapter was closed, but apparently it wasn't so simple. Silas explained that Cora's ex-fiancé was making threats, claims that Cora had defrauded him of wedding costs. He even hinted at legal action, which Silas believed was baseless, but worrisome nonetheless. Fear gnawed at me. I remembered how Donovan had wielded financial power over me, and I could see the parallels in Cora's situation. "Is she safe?" I asked, my voice quivering. Silas said she'd found temporary refuge at a friend's place, but he's still worried about her emotional well-being. "She's still fragile, Mom, and this guy knows how to manipulate her." He said. I tried calling Cora immediately. After several rings, she picked up with a shaky hello. The stress in her voice was palpable. She told me she felt overwhelmed by guilt. Guilt for ignoring my past advice, guilt for how she treated me, and guilt for the financial mess she might be facing. "He's saying I owe him thousands of dollars," she whispered, "but it was all wedding stuff for both of us. I don't know what to do." Though we had never been a family that openly comforted one another, I found myself offering unwavering support. "You don't have to go through this alone," I said. "We'll figure it out together." Her sigh of relief on the other end of the line was heartbreaking. It reminded me of a young Cora clinging to me after a nightmare, relieved that her mother was there to chase the monsters away. Over the next few days, Silas, Cora, and I consulted a lawyer. She assured Cora that the ex-fiancé's claims were weak, given the absence of any legally binding contracts stating she owed him. The relief was palpable, but the emotional scars remained. Still, in navigating this new crisis together, we formed an unexpected solidarity. For the first time in decades, we functioned like a family unit, albeit a battered one, confronting a threat head-on instead of pretending it didn't exist. As the legal scare fizzled, something in Cora transformed. The bravado that once defined her began to soften into genuine introspection. She asked me questions about my own past, how I managed the household when Donovan was at his worst, how I found the strength to finally sell the beach house, despite the emotional attachments. "I guess I need to learn how to stand on my own 2 feet," she said one afternoon, eyes distant, reflecting on her own vulnerability. "I've always relied on someone else for validation." It was a conversation I'd longed to have with her, though I never imagined it unfolding under such circumstances. With measured words, I recounted my journey, the sleepless nights, the silent tears, the moment Donovan's death revealed just how little I knew of our finances. "You find your strength when you have no other choice," I told her. "But maybe, just maybe, you can be braver than I was. You don't have to wait for everything to collapse before you claim your life back." Silas joined us occasionally for late dinners at my new apartment, his own life quietly steady. He had begun seeing a therapist, seeking to break his pattern of emotional avoidance. His short, neat hair was almost a reflection of this newfound discipline. He looked the same, but there was a clarity in his eyes that hadn't been there before. We were healing slowly but tangibly. Each conversation felt like a stitch mending a tear in our family fabric. While the heartbreak of the past couldn't vanish overnight, we were laying the groundwork for something healthier. If this journey resonates with you, don't forget to subscribe to our channel. By subscribing, you become part of a community that values genuine connection, resilience, and the power of starting over. Your support ensures that more stories of real transformation like mine can be shared. It might seem like a small gesture, but it has a ripple effect for storytellers who dare to bare their souls. Months passed, and with each week, the tension that once defined our family began to dissipate. We took baby steps toward normalcy. Group texts that included lighthearted banter, shared dinners where we cooked together instead of me bearing all the responsibility, and spontaneous walks along the waterfront in my new town. Cora started a fresh chapter as a freelance graphic designer, using her knack for aesthetics in a way that didn't revolve around capturing the perfect Instagram shot. She ditched the elaborate high-maintenance hairstyles and opted for a simpler shoulder-length look with soft highlights. I want to feel the breeze on my face without worrying about every hair in place, she joked one afternoon, and I smiled at her new authenticity. Silas, in turn, found small but meaningful ways to express himself. He took up gardening, planting succulents on the balcony of his apartment. When I visited, I saw pots meticulously labeled with the names of different species. It's therapeutic, he explained, gently watering them. I never realized how nurturing plants could calm my mind. Yet underneath this growing harmony was a lingering sorrow, the beach house. Though I no longer regretted selling it, I often dreamt of simpler times when the kids were little, and Donovan was still just a charming man with big ambitions. In those dreams, the house was alive with color, laughter, and the promise of tomorrow. Waking up meant facing the reality that we'd left that chapter behind forever. Or so I thought. One crisp autumn day, as leaves rustled in the coastal wind, Silas appeared at my door with an uncharacteristically wide grin. "Mom, you won't believe this," he said, barely containing his excitement. "There might be a chance to buy the beach house back." My heart nearly jumped out of my chest. "What do you mean?" I asked, hands trembling. He explained that the older couple who had purchased it might be relocating to care for an ailing relative. They'd quietly put out feelers to see if anyone was interested in taking it off their hands. Silas, knowing how much the house still meant to Cora and me, reached out. Shock, hope, and fear collided within me. After all this time, did I even want it back? Could reclaiming the house heal our family? Or would it reignite old wounds? I wasn't sure, but for the first time in a long while, I felt the stirring of a possibility. I thought I had lost forever. Cora's reaction to the news was a mix of awe and trepidation. "I don't know if I'm ready to face that place again," she admitted, her voice trembling. She recalled how she had once obsessed over every detail for her dream wedding. Now the very thought of that memory caused her pain, yet she was also undeniably drawn to the idea of returning. "I started something there," she said softly, "and maybe I need to finish it on my own terms." The three of us talked in my living room, the afternoon sun painting golden rectangles on the floor. We weighed the financial aspects. I had enough leftover funds to consider a smaller mortgage, and Silas offered to pitch in, seeing it as an investment in something that might finally anchor our family again. Cora, too, had saved money from her freelance work. Her voice wavered when she said, "Mom, if I contribute, will you let me help decide on some renovations? Real ones this time, not just superficial changes." I couldn't help but laugh, not unkindly, Cora. I'd be happy to share that burden. We all knew the irony. Her previous demands had nearly broken me financially and emotionally, but this time felt different, more collaborative, more grounded in reality rather than fantasies. Still, a knot of unease settled in my stomach. Would returning to the house trigger old wounds, or had we grown enough to reforge it into a space that truly belonged to all of us? After so many years, so many struggles, and so many heartbreaks, I worried we might be romanticizing the idea of the house as a cure-all. We decided to give ourselves a week to think it over. During that time, I took long walks on the beach near my new apartment, letting the waves coax away my anxieties. I replayed memories good and bad, allowing them to surface without pushing them away. One evening, I saw a mother guiding her two small children along the shore, their laughter echoing across the wind. A faint ache tugged at my heart, but this time it was accompanied by a seed of promise. Perhaps we could take what was broken and create something beautiful if we did it together. Eventually, we arranged a meeting with the couple who owned the beach house. The day we drove up, my hands trembled on the steering wheel, and even Cora's usual chatter was replaced by a tense silence. When we arrived, the same porch steps and the same front door greeted us, but the aura was different. The couple welcomed us warmly. They'd done modest improvements, painting the shutters a soft blue and planting blooming perennials in the front garden. Stepping inside felt surreal. The living room walls had been repainted a calming off-white, the floors refinished to a polished sheen. What once felt suffocatingly haunted by old memories now seemed open and airy, as if it too had found a second chance. I saw Cora wandering the hallway, gently touching the walls, as if they might still echo with the missteps of her former fiancé. Silas drifted toward the backyard where the new owners had installed a simple pergola. The wife of the couple chatted with me near the kitchen window, the sun illuminating tiny dust particles in the air. "We've loved it here," she said, a tinge of sadness in her voice. "But family obligations call us away. We heard this was your original home, and we thought you might want it back. There's something special about returning to your roots, isn't there?" I nodded, swallowing hard. Yes, there was something special, but also something terrifying. Reclaiming the house would mean confronting the past head on, deciding which parts of our history to cherish and which to leave buried in the sand. We ended the visit with warm handshakes and an understanding to finalize details with our respective agents. As we drove away, Cora finally broke the silence. "Mom, it's different," she murmured. "It feels less haunted." I glanced at her, my heart brimming with conflicting emotions. "Maybe that's because we're different," I replied. "We've done a lot of growing since we left." Silas added, "If we do this, we do it together. No secrets, no regrets." He looked at me in the rearview mirror, his eyes filled with a combination of fear and determination. I could feel the weight of that pledge, but also the strength it carried. If we truly were in this together, perhaps we might succeed in remaking our old home into a genuine new beginning. Over the next few weeks, everything fell into place with a smoothness that felt almost preordained. The couple accepted our offer slightly below market value because they respected our personal history with the property. Silas and I spent late nights poring over contract details, while Cora contributed her design ideas in a collaborative spirit I'd never before witnessed. We even had a few Zoom calls, all three of us hashing out possible color schemes for the bedrooms and what to do with the old porch swing. Instead of arguments, we found laughter and synergy. Finally, the day came. The keys were in our hands again. Approaching that house as an owner once more sparked a flood of recollections. I remembered the battered old lawn chair where Donovan would lecture me about saving money, the windows through which a teenage Cora would sneak out at night, and the living room corner where Silas once quietly wept after a particularly harsh scolding from his father. But I also recalled the birthdays we did celebrate together when the kids were still small, giggling over melted ice cream cake, and the nights we roasted marshmallows on the shoreline. We decided on a simple private ceremony of sorts, just me, Silas, and Cora, before moving our belongings. We gathered on the back porch, which faced the rolling tide, and spent a moment in silence. The crashing waves provided a soundtrack, and the salty air tousled our various hairstyles, my short bob, Silas's neat cut, and Cora's new shoulder-length waves. We each said a small piece. I spoke of letting go of regrets and embracing this second chance. Silas apologized again for never standing up when it mattered. Cora promised she would honor the house with genuine care, not as a stage set, but as a real home filled with honesty. That evening, as we hauled in boxes and rearranged furniture, the house felt simultaneously familiar and brand new. This wasn't the same place I left months ago, nor the same dynamic I endured for years under Donovan's thumb. We had all changed. The walls seemed to hold their breath, waiting to see if our transformation was real. But with each shared laugh, each supportive gesture, like Silas taking a heavy box from my arms, or Cora retrieving the pizza delivery so I could rest, I felt a sense of validation. We were finally living, not just coexisting. Night settled in, and for the first time in a long time, the house was filled with gentle conversation instead of tension. We sat around a makeshift dining table. We hadn't finished unpacking the nicer furniture yet, sharing a simple meal. The glow of a lone lamp cast our shadows on the walls, dancing in the flicker of a single candle. We'd lit for atmosphere. Cora leaned back in her chair, letting out a contented sigh. I can't believe we're here again, she mused, and it feels right. Silas nodded in agreement, stirring the sugar in his coffee. I swallowed a lump in my throat as I gazed at them, the two people I'd raised who'd once been strangers to me in so many ways now, forging a bond I'd nearly given up on. I know it's not going to be perfect, I said softly. We'll still have arguments, and there'll be days we drive each other crazy. But maybe we can do better this time. My eyes flicked to the old photograph on the mantel, one I'd placed there earlier that day, a snapshot of us on the beach, all smiles frozen in an idealized moment that had long since faded. Now, with a second chance in front of us, it felt like we were stepping into a new frame entirely. Before we concluded our evening, I wanted to say thank you for coming along on this journey. If you found resonance in our struggles and hope in our reunions, please subscribe to our channel. Your subscription supports real human stories of resilience, heartache, and triumph. It means so much to those of us who share our deepest hurts and hard-won victories. I can't promise a fairy tale ending, but I can promise growth. When the moon rose high above our shoreline and the gentle pulse of the waves became our lullaby, I realized that was enough. We don't need a perfect story. We just need a genuine one, a story where mistakes pave the way to understanding, where heartbreak leads to strength, and where forgiveness isn't an event, but an ongoing choice. And as I looked around at my children, Cora's soft features illuminated by candlelight, Silas's thoughtful gaze, I knew that at long last we were writing that story together. As our story's embers fade, I hope its warmth stays with you long after you leave this space. This mother's journey from heartbreak to healing reminds us that sometimes the greatest act of love is letting go even when it hurts. Now I'm turning the fireside over to you. Would you have sold the house that held so many memories? Or would your heart have chosen a different path? The beauty of these stories is that they mirror our own choices in ways we never expect. If this tale touched something deep within you, let me know with a gentle tap on that like button. And if you haven't already become part of our Fireside family by subscribing, it's the best way to ensure these flames keep burning bright with new stories each week. From wherever you're watching, whether it's a bustling city or a quiet countryside, I cherish every comment you leave. Your stories and perspectives add depth to our shared experience here. Until our paths cross again by these warming flames, remember that every ending holds the promise of new beginnings. This is her Fireside Stories, where life's most powerful lessons are shared with love